Hello again, everyone, to our latest episode of the Tuesday Night Smite podcast. Today's going to be episode 6, obviously. And this episode's topic is going to be a general split recap, specifically for all the teams that didn't make DreamHack. So we're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about things that concern the split in general. Basically the way the meta was set up, all that kind of stuff. We're also going to decide on our MVPs for the entire split, and yeah, that's what is to come. I'm of course gonna be your host, Robbie Dog. I should have probably introduced myself a bit earlier, but who cares? And I'm here today with Sabo and Psycho. And as always, we are gonna start with the EU side. Gonna wrap those teams up first, and for that, Psycho would like to take the word right now. So tell us what happened.
Yeah, we are gonna go from the bottom to the top for the 4 teams in EU that didn't make DreamHack. And that means our first topic will be Burrito. Obviously a new team to the SPL, and it really showed this split, with them taking just one game throughout the whole split. And it was also against a Challenger Cup team that made SPL this split.
Yeah, I think the sort of theme for both of those teams coming up from the Challenger Cup is really settling into the SPL, right? Because that is something that is just required of them to do, is trying to get accustomed a bit to the type of play that you have in the SPL, the type of pressure you're under, and the type of meta that is played, obviously, and the type of competition you play against. So all those different things generally make it a bit harder for any team to really have a big impact in the first split, I think. And Burrito suffered under that a bit as well, in my opinion.
Oh, this is a team to me that got better every week. They didn't really have too many weeks where they looked like they took a step back. Like you said, it was their first split in the SPL coming up from the Challenger Cup, so the skill level vastly different than what they were used to, but they did look like they were getting better every week, and that's all I can say about them. I mean, Johnny, Death Panther, Sibby, the Phi brothers, or I don't think they're actual brothers, but they both in with the Phi and their gamer tags. But yeah, they got better, and I don't know if that translates to the fall split. We'll have to see how they do in relegations again, but I expect them to be in I expect them to be a part of the SPL next split.
Yeah, as you said, they shown improvement throughout the split. One thing I really remember was in week 4, I think it was, they actually managed to have a really close game with Obey. First game of the set. And actually they were in the lead for about half of the game. And took it to about 40 minutes until they finally ended up falling to Obey.
Yeah, that was their lack of late game experience, in my opinion. It's just, we know Obey has been in these late game situations plenty of times, and it's shown in that game 1 where it kind of looked like Burrito lost their way as it got later and later. But the first 35 to 40 minutes was really solid from a team that's bottom of the league.
Yeah, I think they've also got a solid foundation, obviously, like any team in the USPL really has, in my opinion. And I think it's just part of the issue with these lower ranked teams as well, is that they sometimes can struggle to close out these games, especially against the opposition that they shouldn't necessarily be beating, because there's probably also a mental factor that plays a role there, right? Because if you're up against this team that is supposed to be so much better than you, you're really gonna take care to not throw the game somewhere, because it's especially easy to throw the game against a team with the quality of Obey on it. So I think that plays a role as well, that you're kind of scared to take the risks that you probably sometimes need to take to really close out a game if you have to lead, right?
Yeah, the mental factor is something we don't really discuss a whole lot, but it's definitely there. Yeah, you can't be scared of anybody, no matter like what level of play you're playing at in Smite. You gotta be willing to take these fights, but take these challenges that you're not necessarily favored in, but you still have to give it a shot. And like you said, it could be a factor in these lower teams when they face these higher ranked best in the world teams like Obey and Dignitas and stuff, and people like that, teams like that. It's certainly a factor that I would watch, but I would hope players at this level, I hope it doesn't affect them as much as it normally would somebody else. Like if I get in a ranked game against Barracuda, I'm probably crapping my pants because I'm probably going to lose, and I know I'm probably going to lose.
I don't disagree with this, but this one game especially, it was, for me, it was just because Spenify didn't really step up. I think he was playing Freya, and then the 40-minute game with less than 10,000 player damage. Like that definitely played a role in the game.
Yeah, of course. Whenever your ADC is only doing 10k damage over a 40-minute game, it's gonna play a big role, because they are supposed to come online a bit more as the game goes on, and to have that ability to start carrying.
Well, in his defense, the two late game ADCs, the latest games ADCs in the game is probably X-Ball and Freya. So it takes a little while for their damage to come online. So it's the fact that he was playing Freya, you would like to see him a little bit more player damage than 10k, but she's certainly a late game character and needs some time. So,
all 40 minutes seems like game enough for me.
Yeah, that I was gonna say that, and I think Freya's more mid game, honestly, because she has like 3 or 4 items that she really needs to get completely online, and afterwards she's not gonna get the same type of massive power spikes anymore, if you ask me. Because obviously a late game hunter, a really late game hunter with a crit build is gonna outbox the Freya. He's gonna outbox everything. And out TPS of Freya as well, obviously.
I'm gonna put a piece of my experience as a magical ADC player. You don't build Telkines on Freya instead of Tahuti.
I wouldn't expect you to have to build Telkines anymore anyway. It's all about that Bancrofts and what's Fatalis, right? It's what the 2 items that you want to get on her.
Yeah, so like if you want to spend a lot of gold on a 5th item, don't buy Telkines and just buy Tahuti.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just the point is, I think she's online with Bancrofts, Boots, and Fatalis. And afterwards, she's not getting massive power spikes anymore. Except from Tahuti.
You look at what's in her kit as far as CC forms of CC goes. She still has that frostbound effect on her auto attacks when she hits you. So that's always there. The community has expressed hope that Hi-Rez would remove the frostbound effect from her, but they haven't yet. that's always relevant though. That frostbound effect is always relevant, so it helps her box in the late game.
Honestly, I think if she tries to box without her 1-up the entire time against a late game hunter with double or triple crit, if I can say it, she's gonna fucking die.
There was actually no crit items that game, not a single one.
Well, okay, I guess that is a thing. Yeah, shifter shield builds, no. So.
Yeah, shifter shield into penetration is what most hunters are going with right now.
But that is in that case, that's then not a real boxing build, right? Because you're also going to oboe and just trying to do AoE damage to the entire team, and that works as well, of course. But then they're not going to be looking to box the Freya really. But that is all really besides the point.
Yeah, we got off topic here.
So what was the point?
When was Burrito getting better as the split goes on?
Yeah.
And it was more games than just this one. They actually also had a nice lead against Rival in their first game. They did throw it a while later, but it shows they can get a lead. Now they just need to learn how to work with it.
I think learning how to finish the game is the hardest part of what it takes to be in the SPL. When you have a lead, and if you're not snowballing, if the game is still somewhat close, learning how to finish it is probably one of the hardest things for a new team to do.
Yeah, because whenever you're getting into that type of territory, finishing a game, and just in general the late game team fights, you're probably not going to be as used to it as you are to the early game, because you always play the early game in Smite, as I've said, right? You always play the early game, and sometimes you do not play, or a lot of the times you do not really play the late game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you get more experience playing the early game than you do the late game. And even if you have a lot of experience playing a late game in, say, the Challenger Cup, the skill level vastly different. So a late game scenario against an SPL team like Dignitas or Obey is a lot different than that late game against the Challenger Cup team. I don't know. I'd give Burrito, if I were to give them a grade, like a ranking or something, based on how well they did this split, I would give them maybe a 65, because we weren't expecting much from them, but to see them get better is a lot. As the weeks go by, was a something good to build on for the future. So
yeah, I think I would give them a B for potential. Yeah, no, but seriously, I think if we mention how they led that game against Obey with Fusify having a terrible game, right? You kind of see what the upper limit for this team could be, because if Fusify has a good game there, they might take a game off of Obey. And if you consider that, I think that's the direction this team can grow into if they manage to stay in the SPL. And it makes me hopeful for the following splits, right? Psycho?
What can I say here, really? Like, Burrito is improving, and we obviously see that through the split, and if they stay in the SPL, we will see them go to an even higher skill level. I'm just repeating what was already said.
Yeah, I think the only fear that you can have surrounding Burrito is, oh well, the only two fears obviously are them potentially dropping out of SPL, obviously during relegations, and the question that remains is really if they're going to improve faster than the other teams, right? Because that is always a question as well. If you can improve yourself as much as you want, if the other teams ahead of you are improving faster than you, you're not going to catch up to them.
Well, I still see them winning an SPL spot out of relegations next split. I think it's going to take them another split before they actually find any kind of consistent winning. But it's a good team going forward. It should be a decent team going forward. I just don't know if asking them to make a run at Worlds or even to Super Regionals is realistic right now. I think they should take the fall split as a let's get better instead of let's make Worlds.
I don't think Burrito has a chance to make with their current skill level.
But it should be the end goal for almost every team in the SPL. You're playing in the SPL to make it to Worlds and get a shot at winning Worlds. So it should be the end goal for everybody. But I think Burrito needs to take this fall split and just say, hey, let's get better.
It should be, but for Burrito, not this year.
Well, we'll see. Like, honestly, a lot of things can happen in the 4 months that we've still got leading up to Super Regionals, or to the gauntlet that we'll probably have deciding the last few spots for Super Regionals, and they have a chance of breaking in there if things go well for them in the fall, and we'll honestly have to wait and see. As I said, I think this team also has potential. I'm not that hopeful for them yet because they've not shown me enough consistency and enough of that potential for me to really rank them as a team that is definitely going to improve into this right direction. But as I said, the room is there. The room to grow is there. It just needs to be filled somehow. So what I'm really wondering though is, how would you guys judge the Poppies on how they have done this split and how they can improve going into the fall if they manage to stay in the SPL as well? Because just to kind of bridge between those two teams now.
The Poppies did better, in my opinion, than what most people expected them to do. Can't remember who they found their splits against, but I know one of them was against Elevate. And
one was actually against Rival.
Yeah, Rival. Did they split with Energy, or did Energy?
Now they obviously split with Burrito.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot about Burrito.
Burrito, Elevate, and Rival.
Yeah, we were just talking about Burrito.
But yeah, they split with teams. I think they found more splits than what people expected them to. Even against the higher end teams like Energy and Dignitas, they didn't look terrible against. But there's definitely room for improvement there. Like we saw, like you said with Burrito, there's definitely talent there. They should find their way back into the SPL out of relegations this coming fall. If I were to say where they need to get better, all of it on me. For me, all of it just goes to Oho Boom, their mid laner. he didn't have a bad split. It was like there, and that's it. Like I don't know how else to say it. I mean, he was the mid laner. He was in every game, but he was very quiet. Is very unimpactful. And going forward, I'd like to see Oh Boom make more of an impact because the rest of the team, Dre and Warchi specifically, had very good splits. Oh Boom was the worst part of a decent team, in my opinion. Like he can be more impactful going forward, and if he does, they should be a team to look at for maybe winning the gauntlet and making it into super regionals as a wild card team.
I actually agree with that, but it's not like he had bad showings, but he also didn't have great showings.
Yeah, like, he's kind of like a middle of a road, like the middle of the road. Like there was nothing there that impressed you, but there was nothing there that was like, oh, you don't belong in the league.
Well, honestly, I think overall, I would say that Creed had a worse split than him. If I'm being honest, because I've seen good games out of Osho Boom, and I've not really seen the same type of performance really from Creed. He's kind of been a bit disappointing to me throughout the entire split, even though I didn't have too many expectations, obviously.
Now the question is, if the Puppies were to replace a player, who would they replace him with?
Which one are you talking about, Ho Boom or Creed?
Actually, I meant both because, like the Puppies, it's a Spanish team, so they would have to probably change up the comms if they were to pick up a foreign player.
See, I don't see them making changes because they are a team that have been together for so long. I don't really see them making changes, but if they were to replace one of those two, or even both of them, Mr. Stefan was good last split. During the spring split, I was like impressed with him, so he's an option for the mid lane. As far as solo lane goes, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, if they're going to stay a Spanish team with Spanish calling and all that kind of stuff, I just don't know enough about the Spanish scene to really say who they could bring in as a solo laner or as a mid. But if they were to change that, obviously there's a lot of options still in EU. Right, we have Salia, who's currently a free agent as far as I know, who they could bring into solo lane. But
is Asher still a free agent? Oh no, he's on Clovis Orso.
Snakeskin.
On
Snakeskin is currently their coach, apparently, according to the wiki.
Yeah, but like my point was, they have to stick with Spanish players, or they could make a change for the worse if they have to change the way they do stuff.
That's why I don't see them make
up a. Yeah,
I
so
just
like,
want to see.
So you basically need to see the players themselves improve, or Bapix will be in trouble. Simple way of putting it.
I think
they're all.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I think. Are we gonna have to play rock paper scissors? Who goes first? All right.
Pretty sure that doesn't work that well over the internet.
Yeah, I can tell you whatever I want. Like, hey, I got rock. Oh yeah, paper. Okay, but yeah, I think the team itself, the players on the team, are fairly good players. They just needed some more impactful performances from a few players. It looked a lot of the time it looked like Warchi and Drelo were just playing 2-on-5, and the rest of the team wasn't really doing much to help them out. I'm not going to say Draco Marino was a bad support because he did look decent at times, and that role itself doesn't get a whole lot of love. So I'm not going to say anything about Draco Marino. I think he was a decent support, but Oho Boom has to step up and has to play better. Creed, Roby brought up the point. Creed looked like he had the worst split than Oho Boom, but their Soul Lane is not. It's not the easiest role to play because it's not just about playing the game. It's about the mentality of the game and that chess match that solo laners tend to play against each other. And Creed had to play against some very good solo lane bullies, solo lane chess players in EU. So I tend to give solo laners a little bit more of a pass than I do the other roles because that role, there's a lot more to it than just actually strategy. You have to outsmart your opponent in a solo chess match.
At this point, you could say the same about ADCs in this current meta. And we did see Warchi playing really good.
Yeah, I think you can say that about a whole lot of roles that you kind of have to outsmart people. Obviously in solo it's more you have to outsmart one person, and in the other roles it's more about trying to outsmart the team as a whole. But I'm not entirely sure which one would actually be easier to do.
I'm just saying the mental game that is played in the solo lane is a lot more impactful on who wins that lane than most of the other roles in the game.
Solo is usually the most stressful role because you're basically 1v1 most of the time. It's like maybe even at this level of play, if Igreed is scared, if he's going up against one of the best solo laners, maybe that will definitely hurt. Like, that hurts your mentality if you're not confident you can win the lane. Or at least not lose it. But that could also be why Creed hasn't been performing that well in the solo lane. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Are we all in agreement about poppies? They just need to play better and have a better performance from their players instead of making roster changes.
Yeah, I think at least if they want to find some success in the coming months or just still in this season, that's how they're going to have to do it, because rebuilding the entire team with a new language for the entire system to work within is going to be way too difficult and going to take way too much time for them to actually be able to make roster changes to significantly better players that are available. For it to have success in this short term, like looking at regionals, looking at the fall split, relegations, and potentially super regionals, right? So I think if they want to have success in that sort of time frame, they need to stick together, or they need to get new players out of their own region that they kind of have. But long term, I think this team might have a chance to be a better roster if they were to take in players from other nations, just because the talent pool would be so much bigger.
So basically similar to Burrito. just looking to improve split instead of really trying to just go for worlds.
I think Burritos needs to look at just getting better this split. The Poppies, if players perform better, I think they have it in them to make a run into super regionals like I said, at least through the wild card and the gauntlet. If the split is set up the same like it was last year, you're looking at the teams that like Elevate and Enix will be the other two teams in the gauntlet, along with the Challenger Cup team and Burrito. I think Poppies could make a run at making that wild card spot for super regionals. I think that's a realistic possibility, but they have to play better. I just think Burrito needs to get better. I think Poppies have to play better. And I don't know if there's that much of a difference in the two, but that's at least how I see it.
I think for Burrito, there's more of a chance to improve through roster changes, even though I don't think they're going to make any going into the fall. But they have more of a potential to do so than the Poppies do, right? That is the only difference I really see between those two teams. Because they both have room to grow. I think we've even seen a bit more of that from Burrito than we've really seen from Poppies. Because Poppies have never looked terrible in a game, but they've also never looked super impressive, if you ask me. Whereas we've really seen both of those from Burrito, in my opinion. And so I'm not sure if they have the same growth potential, or if I would give them the same growth potential as I would Burrito. But overall, they're in a similar position, if you ask me. Also, I think I just said something stupid, because I'm pretty sure Poppies actually lost the game without getting a single kill this split.
Yeah.
That was against Elevate.
Elevate
they
16-0.
But it was the first game of the split, I think, so we'll ignore it.
And the Poppies did get a split. That's important to say. Poppies did split with Elevate after Elevate crushed them in game one.
Yeah.
That was basically the second game. Yes, they played against Enix. That was our very first game of the split.
Still, first week, it counts. They got better. It didn't happen after that, so they are now more consistent.
I think Dignitas wiped the floor with them, but that's Dignitas. I wouldn't look too much into that one. All right, we ready to move on to Elevate? Team I'm excited about.
Yeah, I think we are. Unless Psycho has something.
Yeah, I have nothing about Babbies anymore. That means we can move on to Elevate.
All right. This is a team like I said, I'm excited for going forward. I think they looked middle of the road this split, getting better towards the end as Cherio got more comfortable on the team. Obviously, they had Nika in the first week as their jungler before switching to Cherio. I don't know, like the last week's game against Rival where they just destroyed Rival. I'm not sure if that's because Deathwalker wasn't there, or if Elevate was actually getting to that point where they're good enough to compete on that level. But again, team is getting better, and I can't wait to see what they do in the fall split. To me, they have to be the favorite, or if not one of the favorites to win the gauntlet. They might even find their way into that top four and skip the gauntlet completely and just make it to super regionals. It's going to take some work on their part, but I think the way this roster is growing, I think it is a definite possibility. So one player I need to see more out of is Nulissa. Just like a bigger god pool or something that fits better with the team, because I really think she is I can't say odd man, but like the odd person out on this team for me. Like she stands out as a different player altogether than the rest of the players on this team. And I want to see her do more or something. Like she has to do something. But the team itself is got a real bright future ahead of them.
I just want to see. It's kind of difficult to say, but once the all players settle in, with Cherio especially, I don't think Nulissa is a problem. Like I've seen good games from her.
That's not my thing. I don't see her as a problem either. The way she plays is very different from the way the rest of the team plays, and I want to see her kind of move closer towards that way the rest of the team plays.
I think she can bring some sort of balance to the team through that, though, and I think especially with the more utility-based picks, she can have a decent impact in the game, right? Because we've seen her on the Giannis mostly using it for utility. And it's obviously a lot different of a god than really any other mid, but other utility picks could work for her as well, if you ask me. And I think she can find success with that, but she's gonna have to increase her god pool a bit. I will agree with that. It seems like all mids sort of have a pretty small god pool right now, but she definitely has also one of the smaller ones, I would say, because I think we said multiple times during the split that only her Giannis has really been super impressive, and it's questionable whether just one super impressive mid pick is gonna cut it for Elevate going into the fall. But outside of her and outside of her small issues that she really had, in my opinion, I don't think this team has a clear-cut problem player, so to speak, if you know what I mean.
Actually, when you say Nulissa, the first thing that pops up in my mind is actually her Isis. Like we have seen, when she plays Giannis, it's always impressive. But we haven't seen her play Giannis that much, instead opting for the Isis most of the time. Which she also uses as a utility god. And also for the objective secure.
Yeah. So Isis is one of those picks that goes into this utility direction, obviously, because she has her silence, her stun, and the giant ultimate circle of protection, I think it's called. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which are all sort of utility spells, right? One is obviously CC and heavy damage spell as well, but the CC is a utility part, and the protection shred and silence from her dispel magics also purely utility spell. And circle of protection has so much stuff that you can do with it that it has a certain amount of utility.
Well, when I think about Nulissa's god pool, I'm looking at one of Cherio's best gods or favorite gods playing that jungle role, and that's Nija. And Isis and Giannis are good utility picks for, like other junglers that want to get in and out. There's a lot of mobility that those two characters allow you to do, but on Nija, what most teams are looking for when they pick Nija is when he goes up and he brings that person down, that person's stuck. To blow him up with a huge mage ult. I haven't seen enough of those gods from Nulissa to really synergize well with Cherio's Nija pick. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt with a player as good as Cherio being able to finish these kills afterwards, but it's a little more dangerous for him to follow up off of his ult if he doesn't pick up the kill without that huge mage ult underneath him to finish off the kill.
Yeah, I think some of her picks that she did make were also going into sort of that direction, right? Obviously, the Giannis can just portal them against once they drop down, and then hit them with the Unstable Vortex, or just prepare the ult to hit them with once they drop down. We saw her play Nox, I think, to little success, obviously, and no, not obviously, just also worth mentioning. But she has that ability to put down her big circle and have the enemy drop into it, obviously, as well. And there are other gods that serve more of a utility role that can do the same thing, right? Isis obviously still has Circle of Protection that can be used to finish someone off after they drop down from a Naja ult in combination with her other abilities. And a Ra could work as well, because Ra has that healing, which is his big utility factor, even though it's a different one from the other utility factors that we really talked about. But there are other picks that can serve that type of utility role by still providing the burst to finish someone off from a Naja ult, right?
I have two things to say right now. The first one is Isis is actually not that bad with Naja, because he can... I think the ultimate still charges up when Naja is dealing damage in the air. So when they fall down, the ultimate is somewhat charged, and it can be popped immediately. And my second point is that we have seen Nilissa pick Scylla in the last few games, and maybe that's a sign of her picking up new gods, or gods that synergize more with Cherio's playstyle.
Yeah. Like, all I'm saying is... Go ahead.
Yes.
Wait, should I go with it? Okay, I was going to say that all I'm saying is that I'm not sure if Nilissa is ever going to become a great mid laner on these carry picks, right? Or these purely high damage picks like a Scylla or like a Poseidon or like a whatever else you may have. I think her niche could be those more utility based picks, and I think they could have success with those picks because they can have Cherio on carry gods instead, because he's proven that he can play those. Like, Cherio is not a bad jungler, and he has that type of potential to fulfill a carry role within his team instead of his mid laner, in my opinion.
Where do you guys see this team going in the fall split? Do you think they have a shot at making super regionals as part of those 4 teams, or would the gauntlet be a more realistic prediction for them making that wild card spot?
Well, I think with how weak we have seen Enix, we're going to talk about them later on as well, and Rival B, well, with Rival it's more the inconsistency, obviously, but with how we've seen those teams perform in the summer split, if they don't significantly step up their game and Elevate manages to step up theirs to some extent, I think they have a shot at beating them out for 4th place in EU. So I would say they have a chance.
I don't think Elevate is a bad team. They probably would have a shot, but the other EU teams are just too good. Like, we have NRG, Dignitas, and Obey.
Oh yeah, wait, I just remembered there's not gonna be four direct super regional spots probably for EU, but if there are, they have a shot in my opinion still.
Well, if the format's the same as last year, those three, Dignitas, Obey, and Energy, I think would probably be the favorites going in right now to get those top three spots. But that fourth spot, that fourth team at Super Regionals, Rivals' inconsistency and Enix's forward play at times could lend to the possibility of Elevate being that fourth team at Super Regionals and not having to go through that gauntlet to make it to Super Regionals as a wild card team. It's definitely a possibility, and I'm hoping for it because I really like this roster and I want to see them actually do good.
Yeah,
but let me finish.
Yeah,
I was actually just going to say that Elevate can take the fourth spot, but they won't be looking for the top three. They just said it instead of me. Yes,
yeah. In that case, like we're all agreeing pretty much that they have a chance to take that spot off of Rival and the team we're gonna talk about right now, Enix. What about Enix, guys?
I had really high hopes for Enix at the start of the split, and they didn't show as much later on.
Yeah.
Like I don't think they're. It's hard with Enix. Like they took games off the top teams, and then struggled against the lower end teams. It's just up and down with them.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe this team, is up and down or just inconsistent somewhat.
Enix was that team that everybody was excited for not just going into week one, but after week one. Looking at the roster, adding Fells and Ducky to start the split, a lot of people thought they had made enough of an upgrade over Ferio and Zelia to actually push them into that top four over Rival. But it was a very lackluster, disappointing split for the team as a whole. Up and down, all split. Like taking games off of top teams, struggling against lower end teams is like to go into every week with a 50-50 shot at splitting, I guess is not too bad, but you kind of want to win some of those games against. You want a better than a 50-50 shot against lower teams like Burrito and Poppies. You want that to be almost like 75-25, like, or 90% to 10% chance of winning it. Like you want that, and I just don't see that. I didn't see that from this team at all this split. They look very, very to me.
Well, honestly, I think their split wasn't disappointing looking from the perspective of before the split. Because before the split, I was expecting them to be at around this position, right, fighting over fourth place against Rival, which they did. Obviously, they had the same points at the end of the season. They missed DreamHack because they lost the head-to-head against Rival. And it's really only after the first week that we started touting them as one of the best teams in EU. I think Psycho had them as making DreamHack in first place, right, as first seed from EU after the week one.
I did have them.
Yeah.
I did think they would be.
Yeah, because they just looked so good, right? And from that type of perspective, it is disappointing how their split ended, how they were unable to actually manage to make DreamHack. But overall, I don't think they have to be disappointed with this thing, right? They have to set themselves back to the mindset they maybe had before the split and look at the split through that lens, and then I don't think it was a disappointment for them.
Well, I can say it was a disappointment for me.
I think it's a disappointment as far as they let a couple of games get away from them that they probably should have won in all realistic, in all possibility. Like they let some of these games get away from them. And
yeah, but I think
if their goal is to make DreamHack, which it should have been, don't want that. It's disappointing to the part where you drop these games to these teams that you shouldn't have.
Yeah, but what I think is, from what we've seen from them, that inconsistency. If inconsistency is your biggest issue and you manage to compete with top tier EU opposition without that inconsistency, then you are already in a good position, because that is the one thing you need to fix to become a top tier team, right? And it's easier to fix that than to have to try to experiment around to find a solution to a not nearly as transparent issue, in my opinion.
When I said it was disappointing for me, is because we actually saw Enix. You already said it. They had the same scoreline as rival, and so like that makes you think, if they won one fight in a game they lost, they would be at DreamHack. Like, and that's like, that makes it disappointing for me. Like, if they didn't perform at all, it would just be like, oh, we were wrong. They were not a top tier team as we thought. But it's like, they are good, but not nice.
Yeah, but still, I think this is a better place to be, right? If nothing is working at all, you have to take a shot in the dark and make roster changes, or just drastically change the way you play the game to actually get forward, or to attempt to get forward. With this roster they have now and their performances we have seen, I think if they work on becoming more consistent, whatever you have to do for that to actually be a thing, right? They can take steps forward rather easily, because they already have this foundation that is working set up.
Yeah, if you watch their videos, like Deep Meanix videos, you see they are learning from their lost games. Like, they watch the bad fights and see what could go better.
Yeah, but what I'm wondering in that regard, have we actually seen improvement from them as the split has gone on? Right, because there is something to be said about noticing your mistakes, and it is an entirely different thing to actually fix them. There are players in other games that have been mentioned that sort of make mistakes, acknowledge that they made this mistake, promise to not do it again, and then they just do it again, because they can't focus on not making all of those mistakes that they make. So do we think these players and this team has it in them to stop making mistakes?
Oh, definitely. Just looking at the roster, I think they're all fairly strong players. Ducky and Fails in particular have really big upsets to them, because we've already seen what Funballer and Lobster can do, and big man teams. I think is one of the better supports in EU at the time. I think Fels and Ducky, if they continue to improve and get better and reach their potential and actually having consistent play out of them, I think this team could definitely be at Worlds this year. It's going to take some work to beat out those other 4 teams ahead of them, but just the roster, just looking at the players on the roster, Worlds with improvement is a very much a thing for them. I don't think you can look at this team and say that they don't have a shot to make Worlds.
Yeah, I think after the performances we've seen, there's no denying that really, because as we've pointed out, they have split with, I think, Obey and Energy, if I'm not mistaken. And splits against that caliber of team, right? That's still an impressive feat, and it is something that you can build on. Because, or it's not even necessarily that it's something that you can build on. It's something that you can build towards doing more regularly and starting to break into that top tier in EU.
I definitely think Enix still can be one of the best teams in Europe. They will have to work a bit for it. Like, they seem like a broken clock that they just need to fix that one clockwork.
Yeah.
Make it all work again.
The other question would be, is this a team that could look for potential roster changes or needs roster changes?
Well, Europe as a whole is not big on making roster changes. I don't see them making a roster change. Like I said earlier, it's a team of all highly skilled players. They just got to work out some of their inconsistency mistakes. They should definitely be right there in the thick of things. Come time for the super regionals and worlds and stuff.
I don't think after they stuck so long get their as paradigm, I don't think they will make any changes after one mediocre split.
Well, you could call their they did make roster changes from spring going into summer, and it was also just after one mediocre split, right?
Well, Zelia wasn't, I don't think, was the right fit for this team. Even though he had been playing with Lobster and Funballer for the better part of 2 years, I always thought Zelia was the odd man out when it came to those paradigm teams.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that this team that they have right now, this roster, seems to have more synergy among each other than the previous one did. That you don't think they're gonna make roster changes due to that. Am I getting this right?
Yes. I just want to see them fix their issues as far as consistency goes. They have the player skill. We've seen every member of this team reach that level. They just need to do it on a consistent basis.
Yeah. I think that is something that I can subscribe to, honestly. So, do we want to wrap up the EU side, or do you have anything else you want to talk about, you guys?
I think we're good for now. We'll obviously come back to them a little bit later when we discuss rookies and the MVPs of the split. But for right now, I think we're good.
Good. Then
Yeah, I'd have to agree.
Yeah, good. Then in that case, you can keep going, Sabo, and introduce us to NA. Also, I just
Okay,
want to say
well,
at this point, happy 4th of July, by the way, because that is today, and we're going NA now. I promise not to make any bad jokes about NA today, only good ones.
no jokes you can make. We're America. We make jokes about ourselves. Um, but yeah, first team up is obviously Flashpoint. They didn't bind. They win this split. A lot of roster changes happened over the course of the split. Dante LaFargo's gone. Uh, Dobbs is the only one that began the split that's still there. If you don't count Shadow Q and Mirage, which I don't because they were on the team in the spring. So for me, I said this a little last week. It's got to be if the sponsor decides to stick around and keep trying to make a run at a Smite Pro team, they have to make the decision to build the team around Walrus and just let the other four go. Shadow Q's pretty much past his prime. He's not as good as he once was. Obviously, he's really good at Hand of the Gods, the Smite card game that Adonis is a part of now. So there's an option for them. His brother's playing that game too, so that's another option for him. I don't see the team doing well without significant changes, especially since they are the Challenger Cup, or not the Challenger Cup, but they are the SPL team that is been relegated. Just the two Challenger Cup teams are a Mighty Storm and SPL Gatekeeper, and just looking at their rosters, if Flashpoint doesn't do something to improve their roster drastically, Flashpoint's not going to make it back into the Pro League next split.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that, but something we have to consider is that we were saying the same things in the spring relegations, or no, in the summer relegations, because we obviously had still a weak Flashpoint roster, the same one we had at the start of this split, somehow managed to stay in the SPL, surprisingly enough, and it was a miracle. Not sure if they're going to get a second one, but if they don't, then I think I agree that they are very likely no longer going to be in the SPL come the fall split.
Well, we have seen them play in relegations with the new team, like with new players. Guess they did finish 7th in the 8th in the spring season, but then they made roster changes and made it back to the SPL. So maybe if they do it again, we can still see some of those players stay in the SPL. But I don't see them making it with the team they have now.
Got to be a drastic roster change for me. I think Walrus, maybe Mirage, because they have played together for a while now. If you go back to Season 3, where they were on that Noble team with Aduro and Wowie and Walrus before they both went their separate ways. So the synergy that those two have could be something you can build around. But right now, Walrus would be the only one that I would think about keeping. And just looking at the rosters for the teams coming up from the Challenger Cup, SPL Gatekeepers, Data Rimber, Pain Divion, Moswell in the mid lane, Brave into the jungle, and Mando Warrior to round it up in the solo lane. Mighty Storm, some familiar names on Mighty Storm as well. Vivian played for Allegiance in the Gauntlet during spring. Venenu played for Hunter for Allegiance in the fall. Uzi Double in the spring. Ghost, if you're not familiar with Ghost, he's been the sub / coach for Luminosity for I think the entire season so far. And then Plasma in the jungle. So just looking at the rosters that the Challenger Cup teams are bringing into this, Flashpoint's in trouble if they don't make major changes, because I don't see these players being good enough as a team to beat out one of those two teams. I think one of those two teams make it to the SPL, and I'm leaning towards the Gatekeepers over Flashpoint. So I don't know what else there is to say. Flashpoint needs to make major changes if they want to make it.
Yeah, I think we've talked enough about Flashpoint during the entire split. Honestly, they've been a point of discussion in almost every week, just how terrible they looked most of the times, and it's been discussed to death. Like we've pointed out all the issues this team has, and there's plenty of them to go over. I don't think we have to dig all of those back up and deal with them again. This team, as we've expressed multiple times, just has so many issues with it in just almost every point of how the game is played, that it is hard to imagine them staying in the SPL. And yeah, I think there's not much to say about Flashpoint.
Well, yeah, Robbie said we shouldn't make jokes about America today, so I just won't say about Flashpoint. Because there's nothing really serious to say about, like, just no.
Yeah, the only thing we can make about Flashpoints are jokes, because that team is sort of a joke itself. So, let's not do that today on this celebratory day, and instead jump on to the next team that is going to be heading into relegations, which is going to be Team AI. Obviously the former Eager squad, who are facing relegations now. How did this happen, and what are we expecting?
Well, I don't expect this team to stick together as it is currently formed. I think the team, after the loss of Zapman and Sam for soccer, I think Xenotronics and El Chapo were put on a team to just finish the split. I don't think the team itself is expecting to go ahead with this current roster. It was a disappointing split for them. Just looking at who they were formerly Team Eager, and they did have Zapman on the team. They're coming off a great run over the past season and a half. So for them to fall down to only finding one win this entire, well, not one win, but one set win, like only picking up 1-2-0 is a very disappointing set for Eager AI. So I don't know what this team is going to look like going forward. Certainly they're in relegations, but I don't expect this roster to be in relegations as it's currently set up. Just looking at the roster, I think Tivios is gone. I think he's just too good of a solo laner that other teams in the SPL are not going to look at to improve their situation by adding a player like Divios. I think Divios is not on this roster come the fall. As far as the rest of the team goes, Aurora will probably stick around. Vest is too good of a mid laner, just the same situation as Divios. He's too good of a mid laner for other teams not to look at. but you're taking away two very big pieces of the team and the best in Divios, and I don't see. I don't know what this team is going to look like going into relegations.
Yeah, I think this team is in the unfortunate position where due to how their split went and how just in general the entire affair went down, they're now in the position where they are going to get poached and are not going to get the opportunity to poach players themselves. So that is probably going to hurt them going forward, because if they lose, well, I think this tricore of Aurora, Best, and Divios is something you can build on, right? And if this core was to stick together, I think they could build a roster that would work well and that could find success in NA. But with how teams are going to be looking for solo laners and mid laners probably going into the fall, and with how bad the split has just gone for AI, it's really going to be hard to keep those players on the team for Aurora, as you said. And I think for Aurora himself, it's mostly going to come down to whether this team stays in the SPL, right? If it stays in the SPL, I think they have a chance to rebuild the entire team around Aurora. They're probably not going to get back up to this level with an entirely new roster that they had in the spring split. But they can build a solid roster around Aurora, because Aurora himself is a good enough player to allow that.
I fear we will see Eager become another Flashpoint if they don't make the right decisions. Because Flashpoint, formerly known as Denial, was one of the better teams in North America, and then we just saw them drop to the worst 8th place. And Eager really has to, yes, they have to make changes, but they also have to make the right changes. Like, I definitely do not expect them to stick together, but if they pick up the wrong players, they might just become a even worse team than they are now.
I think
that is if they make relegations.
I think the current roster is solid enough as it is currently set up to not be that new Flashpoint. It's just this roster was put together in a hurry, and it was just something that they did to make sure that they could finish the split. Bring up, we've already said poaching is what's probably going to happen to this team. If that doesn't happen, though, like, the roster itself is fairly solid, given time to grow as a team. But like I said, I don't expect them to be in this current format for the relegations. I don't expect this current roster to be on the relegations team because of poaching and stuff.
Yeah. No, I just want to emphasize how good this team could be if they stay together, right? Because, or if the core of it, this high skill core of it, stays together. Because if you bring a player like Satman back into the hunter role, or just another really good ADC like Vishian, probably, if he actually gets dropped by Space Station, obviously, and bring in a great jungler, then this is a great team. And that is weird to see, a team that with so few roster changes, in my opinion, could become a great team so deep down in the basement of the NASPL. Guys, please.
Well, build on what you said. This is very much a team that's 2 players removed from an Eager roster that was tied for 3rd place at Worlds. but with the like I said, with the roster shaped as it is, still a fairly good team. Xenotronics has been very good in the hunter role. Not been the greatest hunter, but he's a lot better in the hunter role than he was in mid last season. So yes, he's a downgrade from Zapman, but he's not like the worst player you can ask for in that hunter role anymore. Chapo, it's still only his second split as an SPL jungler. See where he's at in next summer. We might, we could look back at this current roster and say, wow, if they had stuck together, they could have been something special. But like as it is right now, there's too much of growing pains that keeps them from making a fairly solid and good roster. But
Yeah.
my last question is if Divios does get poached, who do you think poaches him? Where do you see Divios going?
Well, I think it might be to LG or to Space Station even, right? Those are the best two teams you would land on because they're obviously number 1 and 2 in NA. Oh no, number 1 and 3. Still, they both have the sort of lacking solo laners that Divios could replace. Because as we've seen, Scary has improved compared to his season 3 form, but he's still gone back down a bit, and he's not looked super amazing this split again. If he doesn't pick up his form back again, he could be removed if Luminosity is trying to improve themselves, because that is the obvious guy that you would replace. And Space Station, we've seen Final K come in and do well, but it's questionable whether he did well enough in their eyes to justify keeping him over a veteran player like Divios.
If Divios, I pretty much agree. Like, if Divios finds himself on a different team in Luminosity, but the question is, what will we see from Luminosity when they go to DreamHack? Because if they do well, we might just see them sticking with Scary D again, like they did at Worlds. They did have a good showing there. Like, I think it will depend on that, how he plays at DreamHack, and if he's not playing spectacular like at Worlds, he will probably be replaced by Divios.
I'm tempted to agree with both of you as far as him going to LG, regardless of how Scary D plays at DreamHack. I think Scary D is the one player on the team, even though he has had a great season so far, or a good season compared to his season 3 performance. I think he is the one player on the team that is holding Luminosity back. So regardless of how he plays, if Divios is available, I think he would be a good fit for LG. Looking at the other teams, though, I think it's easier to say who he is not going to replace. And obviously, there's only 2 teams I see that will not replace their solo laner for Divios. And that's, of course, Psycho Spin on an ALG, because Psycho Spin and Weekend are married, attached at the hips and stuff like that. So those 2 are not going anywhere. And then I don't think there's no way that he replaces Benji on E United. So all the other teams I see could make a play for Divios, except for those 2 teams, ALG and E United.
Yeah. I would add a third to that list, being Trifecta, just due to the history that Snoopy and Ionic have with Divios, because they obviously kicked him out of the original TSM roster they had, during the late season 2, specifically because he was not playing well with them, right? Not bringing the type of mentality that they want, and I think it's questionable that they would want that same type of mentality now.
Well, that being said, we've also seen these relationships that have gone bad in the past get worked out, and the players come back together. I agree with you that it's probably not going to happen with Trifecta, but it's still a possibility that they could work out the issues, and Divios is still an upgrade over Kiki, even though Kiki has been fairly solid for him. The one team, though, that I would be excited for if he went to, despite having a very solid solo laner, but still him being a rookie, would be Noble. I think Divios would work well with on that roster, on that team, and even though Aquarius has had a solid year across his 2 teams that he's played with, I still think the veteran leadership of Divios added to what Stealth brings as far as leadership goes, I think that would be a good fit for Divios as well. But that's hearsay. We don't know if that's going to happen yet. So this is all just speculation.
Yeah, I could see him landing on Noble if the other teams that we mentioned, LG and Space Station, do not want to pick him up, right? Because then he could still be looking for an improvement, and Noble would be the next obvious destination in that regard. So I agree with you on that.
I'm just gonna go back to we have seen players go back together even though they had bad relationships. That's basically why Weekend is in the SPL right now. Yeah.
Well, did Weekend ever have a really bad relationship with Cyclone? Or what am I missing here?
He did.
Yeah, well, but see, it didn't work for Incon, did it? So if you bring in Divios, right, whoever does it is gonna get kicked, maybe, in the end.
But then aside, I agree that Divios could definitely find himself on Noble. Because I like the way, or I didn't hate the way Aquarius played. But having an experienced solo laner like Divios would probably be better for the team, as far as that goes.
Yeah. So if we're done with AI, I would like to go on to ALG now, which also been obviously a big talking point in this podcast all the time, because they had a very special split, so to speak, with how the performance has developed as split has gone on. Yeah, I think Sabo can tell us some more about that.
Yeah, Allegiance was very much the Enix of NA. Had a very good start to the split. Everybody was high on them, and then towards the latter end of the split, they just fell off. And I think I'm pretty sure I'm right here, but they picked up 1 point over the last 3 weeks of the split, and for a team that was tied for first going into week 3, really, really bad letdown on ALG's part. It's hard for me to say that I wasn't excited about this team, because I was. I thought Cyclone Spin and Weekend were finally able to find a support in Niru Ma that would change the team's fortune. It obviously it didn't work out that way. I don't think Nirama was the problem. If the problem to me on this team, as far as inconsistency goes, and why they had such a lackluster back in the split, was that maybe Cyclone's win wasn't having the same impact as he was the first 2 weeks. Very, very impressive performances the first 2 weeks from Cyclone's win. And then, not that he had bad games, it's just he didn't have those carry games like he did in the first 2 weeks that he did in the last 3. Like, he was a big factor in them finding their wins those first 2 weeks, and then nothing from him the last 3 weeks. He was very quiet those last 3 weeks, and that's why I see this team, the reason why this team fell as hard as they did.
Yeah.
I mean, what else can you say? Not to put the whole blame on Cyclone's win, it's just his performance those first 2 weeks compared to what he did those last 3 weeks. He disappeared those last 3 weeks.
Yeah. Like, I don't even think you need to put the blame on Cyclone in this regard. I think you need to put it on the rest of the team not having anything to back up Cyclone if he had a bad performance, right? Because that's more what it came down to. You can't expect your solo laner in the current meta to carry you game after game. It's not going to happen. And if that is your win condition, it is going to fail eventually, which it did.
Yeah, the split was just LG started high and ended really low. But maybe it was like just because they played the better teams at the end of the split. I guess they played the 2 top teams their last 2 weeks.
Yeah, but they split with LG in week 1. Like, that is the other insane thing. They didn't have an easy start into the split. They played LG in week 1, and they managed to get a split, which was why we were hyping it up to be a top team in the first place, right?
But I said it was the same. It was the same with Enix. Like, one game didn't really show the same level of skill in the rest of the split. And Luminosity, I believe we're going to talk about that next week. But I have things to say about Luminosity.
Yeah. I think all of us do.
I mean, ALG, Allegiance itself, they did split with Luminosity. They did end up 2-0ing in United, and I think they split with Space Station. I think.
I'm pretty sure they got 2-0 by Space Station. Yeah, they did in week 6. Week 4, obviously. Yeah.
Okay, well, they still... And obviously they got 2-0'd by Trifecta this last week. But, yeah, just the split in whole. Hot start, bad finish, much like Enix did in Europe. But I said that Cyclone disappearing might have been the reason why, but you make a great point, as the rest of the team really didn't step up to fill that role of Cyclone's not playing where he should this week. Somebody else has to step up, and they didn't have anybody else who did that. And we know Oceans has done it in the past. We've seen it from him in the past. Matt Yankee is still getting used to that mid role. He hasn't, out of the 3 that made that transition from other roles into the mid role, he has been the least successful one so far, but he's still very much getting used to it. So Weekend though, Weekend he has a reputation of playing these gods that really help out his team as far as bringing that support element to the jungle. But we have seen him on these assassins that he can carry on. So why he didn't do that, I'm not sure why. But just looking at their performances this split, I don't think the team as a whole ended the split as they were hoping to, given their start. Roster changes might be in the future for this team. We know Weekend is the captain. We've said before that if Weekend feels like he can make improvements to the team that helps him make it to Worlds, and then he'll do it in a heartbeat, regardless of friendships. I think the only person on this team right now that he does not replace is Cyclospin. But you can make an argument for the other three, knowing Weekend's personality and his reputation, that the other three are very much in trouble of making or of not being on the team next split if he feels like he found somebody better.
Yeah, I think it comes more down to whether he's actually going to be able to find someone. Because in the other roles, right, there will be better people available, probably, if AI actually splits up, right? There are obvious options for two of the roles, mid and support, Aurora and Best. Potential options for ALG. So we might see that happening. We might not. And obviously, if Satman's coming back going into the fall split, Ocean's place is in danger as well.
I don't think the Satman and Weekend like each other at all, so I don't know if that works out. But if I'm wrong, it's certainly a option to bring Satman onto the team, and maybe even Vedium, given if Space Station does actually go with Zatman over Vedium. So there's a lot of potential players there that we could put on this Allegiance team.
Yeah. But I want to go back to something we discussed just a couple of minutes ago. Is it just a base foundational issue, a foundational problem with Allegiance in that case? The reason that they didn't find success in the latter half of the split, because everything relied on Cyclone and the rest of the team hasn't managed to build this foundation of a team that can actually have success.
I think if Sapin finds himself in the SPL, it won't be on ALG. Because, as Sebo said, I also don't think that Zapman and Vegan like each other. And I also think that Vegan has a much better relationship with Oceans. And I don't even think Allegiance is necessarily a bad team. They just need to not drop those games against. Well, I can say that about everything. But they just need to. They don't need roster changes. They just need to improve their play as they are right now.
Foundation of this team is Weekend and Cycle Split. Those are the two members that are probably going to be there the longest if they do decide to make roster changes. Well, I think the foundation of the team is fairly solid as far as players and skill level goes, because both of those two players have had good success in the SPL before. It's the rest of the team that raises questions for me. Oceans was probably the rookie of the year last season. As far as NA goes, at least, he had a very solid rookie season in season 3. Not really taking that next step as becoming one of the top hunters in NA like everybody expected to. But the rest of the team needs to get more consistent. I want to give Matt Yankee a little bit more time before making roster changes. This is Nevermall's rookie split. It's not just his rookie season, but his first split in the SPL. So, like Psycho said, just I want to see him get better, and given time, they should be able to do that. I just don't know if Weekend is going to give them that time, because Weekend's goal is every year is to make Worlds and win Worlds. And like I said, he feels like he has better options. He will make that change without giving it a second thought.
Well, it didn't really work out for him yet. So he should. I think he should just stick with this roster. Aim for Worlds with those guys instead of an entirely new team.
Yeah, I think if they stick together, they need to change how they approach the game in general, right? Because you need to have a foundation, in my opinion, that is not built on solo and jungle. You need to have one that is built around that tricore of your team, mid jungle support, and they don't seem to have a really good, well-functioning one right now. And I think part of the issue might be met, but he needs to try to find better into this mid role. Otherwise, it's always going to be hard for Allegiance to become a top tier team, in my opinion. But yeah,
I think we've said all that we can say about Allegiance. I mean, I don't know if there's anything else to say.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. So shall we move on to the next team?
Noble. I'm going to brag a little bit right now. I called this. I said that they would be a team that competed. Y'all called me crazy, but I was right. So I'm going to brag a little bit and say, hey, I was right. And for me, this team really found success when Skeledon found his footing and upped his game and stopped playing Evo jungle and these crazy junglers that, were all the rage last split, but kind of the meta has kind of taken them back to jungle being the assassins and not these crazy mages, supports like Guardian. But when Skeledon found success, I think the team as a whole started to get better, and Stealth very much was a part of getting big off of Skeledon's setups and stuff. And we know Wowie 1v5'd E United to win game 2 of their split. That's probably the play of the year right now. Unless something else happens in the fall or at DreamHack or at Worlds that wows us more than what Wowie did. I think the team has potential going forward to make it to Worlds in the fall. I really think this is one of the most improved teams of the summer split. And I just want to see them stay together and get better. And if we talked about if they make a roster change and Divios is available, even though Aquarius has played solid and is probably, if it wasn't for Final K, would probably be the rookie of the year. But having that veteran leadership that Divios would bring to the squad if they make a roster change, then that would be the only one that I would recommend or even give thought to. I wouldn't, if anything else, I wouldn't even consider. I would stick with this roster going forward. Anything other than Divios coming in for Aquarius. But the split as a whole, very much the opposite of what ALG did. They had a bad start and finished strong. I think the strong finish is more indicative to what we will see in the fall from this team. It just depends on whether or not Skilladon can still maintain this success he has recently found, because he was one of the weaker junglers in Season 3 and was really didn't live up to the height that we had that the league had put on him for Season 3. And now that he's found some success and found some consistency in that jungle role, I think that he's the perfect fit for this team going forward and what they hopes to do.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. I want to say as well that Skilladon has really stepped it up. I gave him a ton of shit for his performance in week 1, I think, or in the earlier weeks, which I think he deserved to some extent. But him stepping up at the same time as when the team itself started to find success definitely wasn't a coincidence, if you ask me. And so it largely relied on that as well. The rest of the team has really solidified themselves as good players. We've seen Wowie, as you mentioned, have these amazing scenes. We've seen Stealth basically consistently every game pump out that type of damage that you expect from a mid laner. And this team has really looked good. A lot better than I think anyone but you was expecting, as you mentioned. And yeah, they are the most improved team, if you ask me. If we think about the fact that they also went through relegations going into the split, managed to stay in the SPL, and now they had a legitimate shot at making DreamHack 2 weeks before the end of the split, this team has massively improved, and it's been a really impressive and a really entertaining thing to watch.
Yeah, I have to agree with both of you. Like, if Noble played like this at the start of the split, then we would have seen them at DreamHack. And like, if they continue doing this in the fall split, we might see them. I'm actually pretty positive we will see them at Worlds if they have the same showing as in the spring split. Summer split is what I wanted to say.
Yeah. Worlds, even that is making a bold call, honestly. Like, Worlds is still a really long way away, and Super Regionals,
That's why I said if they do continue playing like this, we should probably see them there.
Yeah, I think we might, but as of right now, I think it's pretty solid to call that we're probably going to see them at Super Regionals already, if their form is anything like it has been in those last 3 weeks of the split.
Yeah, Super Regionals should definitely be the goal for this team. Making it to Worlds a little bit tougher than I think what everybody's expecting it will be for them. I do think the teams that finished ahead of them are not going to just sit around and say, "Hey, we're good enough to make Worlds." I do see the rest of North America getting better, but playing like they do, if they play like they did these last 3 weeks, it's definitely could be a team we see at Worlds. Maybe even as one of the wild card teams. And all this is again assuming that the format of the fall split is the same this year as it was last year. So, being in the top 4 teams for super regionals, where 2 sets of the best of 5 and the winner goes on to Worlds, Noble could, depending on who they play and how well they're playing at the time, could win that super regional spot and win the super regional set to make it to Worlds. So I'm not putting them in Worlds yet, but they are good enough to make Worlds. They continue to play like this, they are good enough to make Worlds. So it's going to be fun to watch them in the fall.
Yeah, definitely. I will agree with that. So, what else is there to say about this roster? Like you mentioned, the only roster move that you think is likely to happen or would make sense happening from your point of view is swapping Aquarius from Divios. I would also agree with that. And apart from that, I'm not sure what there really is to talk about. They are the anti-ALG, really, in a lot of ways. And yeah, I think that sums it up.
Just think about the way Stealth's feeling if he heard that ALG is the team that kicked him at the beginning of the season. And he's on the team that is the anti-ALG, I guess. Well, he is due to have a kid very soon, but I guess that's got to be a pretty good feeling itself, too. Being able to say, hey, I'm on a better team than what my old team is right now. And they kicked me. So he's probably on cloud 9. He's probably on cloud 9 right now.
Nice. Yeah. I was going to make the same fucking joke.
If the kid, if his wife has already had the baby, he's probably very tired, but he's on cloud 9. He's asleep on cloud 9, but he's still on cloud 9.
No, if you have a baby, you are not asleep. I think that's all I hear from people who have toddlers is that you don't sleep.
And he's going through the motions on cloud 9. He's on cloud 9, but he's like, he's a zombie on cloud 9 right now. He's just going through what he has to do. But congratulations to Stealth for having the kid. That's big.
Yeah, definitely is. So, another thing that is big, or could have been big, to bridge the gap again, is, well, it was this E-United roster. We had high hopes for them, and things didn't turn out quite the way we were expecting them, I am inclined to say, because they were the last team in NA that also didn't make DreamHack due to specific circumstances that Sabo can now explain to us, because I'm losing my fucking voice.
Well, this E-United team, having replaced Payne Devion and bringing in another player very similar to what Payne Devion did to this team as far as player coach goes of Polar Bear Mike. The team had a very okay start to the split, a very poor mid, but a very solid ending to the split as well. I think the team as a whole did not have the kind of performances that they were hoping to. We made the comment, I believe, week 2 or week 3 about how this team was very much looking like they had a lack of leadership and that nobody was pulling Benji or Verizio back from overextending and getting, as a result, getting the rest of the team out of position. But that the very next week, it looked completely the opposite. I made the comment against Luminosity, I believe it was, where there was a line down the middle of the map at like the back harpies that they would not cross until they got the towers down. And as we saw the week before against Noble, they would go past the harpies all the way to Phoenixes and get caught out of position, because it's very easy for the other team then to go back to base and then get immediately back into the fight, where it's a lot longer walk for somebody on E United. It was almost a day and night kind of thing with this team, as far as what we saw from them from week to week. It a very strong start to the split. The weak middle doomed them. They had a very poor middle. They got 2-0'd by ALG and they got 2-0'd by Noble, two teams that are directly behind them in the standings. If they would have found a split with one of those two teams, they're probably at DreamHack right now. But going forward, as far as how they ended the split, they're very much in the same boat as Noble is that they had a very strong end of the split, and that if they can continue to build on the success they have at the end of the split, they could very well make it to Worlds. They have the roster to do it. All these players are extremely good in their roles. Panda Cat's probably top 3. Hunter, Chaos, when he's playing at his best, is probably the best mid laner in North America, but he's not always playing at his best. And when he's not playing at his best, he's one of the worst mid laners in North America. And then Benji. If Benji is focused and tuned in and dialed and is ready to play, nobody's better in the solo lane, in my point of view, than Benji. But Benji's not always invested 100% of the time, and it's very frustrating to see a player of that caliber not understand that he has to bring it every game, and that if he did bring it, there's nobody in that role that can compete with him. Because I think that he is probably the most underwhelming solo laner at times, and then the very next game is the best solo laner in the world. But that's because he's not always focused on being there 100% of the time. So it depending on how I don't want to see any roster changes from this team. Depending on how they're if they work out some of their consistency issues in certain roles, and Benji and Chaos decide to put it together, I think this team is not only in the discussion of making Worlds, but making finals at Worlds. I think this roster is good enough to do that, even over some of these EU teams. So it's just, what can this team do to not have so many ups and downs to their split as they did in this summer split?
Yeah, I think they've already made progress in that direction, like fixing their own sort of inconsistencies, right? Because as you've already mentioned, they seem to have a shot calling and just a leadership issue during week 3, especially, or during weeks 2 and 3, where they lost against ALG and Noble. The 2 losses that really doomed them for as far as DreamHack is concerned, looking back at it. But we've seen that improvement going forward, and I think that was the biggest issue they had, right? Looking at their last weeks, at touring LG, touring Flashpoint, obviously, and then splitting with Space Station, those are all the results you'd expect from a top tier NA team. And looking forward, if they can maintain this level, they are going to be a top tier NA team, in my opinion. because as you've said as well, they have all the pieces they need, and it looks like they have put them together now to really form a good unit. And yeah, there's not much wrong with this team now. There were things wrong going into the split and going into the middle of the split, but they have largely been fixed. And the only, yeah, they're standing in their own way in some way, or they were standing in their own way at the start of the split. Now they've cleared the way, and it's only gonna go forward, in my opinion.
Now, if we saw the same amount of spots for NA, United would be at DreamHack. And right now I think they are definitely a better team than Luminosity. And maybe even a better team than, what is it now, Trifecta. But they just, that really, the middle of the split kind of didn't work out for them. But I think that was just, that wasn't anything that was really telling the performance throughout their whole split, because they looked really solid at the start and the end. And I definitely agree that they can be one of the top 2 NA teams. Not necessarily with the fact that they will make finals at Worlds, but they will definitely get there.
Well, we keep bringing up the losses to ALG and the losses to Noble, very dooming their split as a whole. Just look at the 2 matches that they had against those 2 teams. They didn't show up at all against ALG, which is really disappointing for a team with players of this caliber. There's no excuse to have that kind of performance against a team in the SPL, unless your name is Flashpoint. But their name is not Flashpoint. Their name is E-United. So there's no excuse for them to really just crap the bed when it came to that set against ALG. The set against Noble was really the bad set for me. And that was the one we talked about where they kept overextending. They kept getting themselves caught out of position, and they lacked the leadership in that set. But that being said, they were in both of those games. They had chances to win both of those games, and Noble just outplayed them. And that's hats off to Noble in all respects. But the team, if we put Noble and E-United side by side at the beginning of the split and said who would win, we would 97% of the time, most of us would pick E-United. And so that split for me was really the one that doomed them. If Wiley didn't have such an amazing play, we would be talking about them at Spring Split or at DreamHack. But Wiley's one magnificent play of the year is really the reason why E-United is not at DreamHack right now.
Yeah, I think right. They are 1 point behind IMOG, and just getting that point somewhere would have put them into DreamHack, and they could have taken it against Noble. They could have taken it against ALG. They could have 2-0'd IMOG and just made everything clear in week 1, but they didn't. And it is sad that they didn't, because as we all say, we have high hopes for this roster. We expect them to be a top tier team going into the fall, due to all the reasons we mentioned, right? And yeah, I think that's what it comes down to is they turned up too late in this split, right? They somehow coasted through the first 2 weeks, partially because they were facing the weaker opponents, right? IMOG in week 1 was not as good as Trifecta is now, and Eager was struggling in week 2 as well, and they got their points against those two teams that they needed to get. Then they started dropping them because of the issues they had, and once they had fixed those issues, they were looking like a top tier NA team, and they are looking like one going into the fall. So I think we all have high hopes for them, and I think that about sums it up, honestly.
Yeah, it just comes down to a consistency and whether or not these players are dialed in. And that's all I can see here because the roster is a good one, is one of the best in North America as far as rosters go. So it's just is each individual player ready to go every game?
Yeah.
So that's all that it comes down to for me.
Yeah, I think that's also something worth pointing out, that Benji and Verisiel are both gonna have to be players that will have that need to have large impacts against their NA opposition, and if they make it to the international lands like Worlds against the EU opposition, if this team wants to succeed as well. But this team is sort of built around them having big games as well, right? Pretty much all of the carries this team has can have big games, which is part of what makes them good. But Verisiel, in my opinion, is really part of their win condition is that he shows up to some extent, and that's also something we didn't see in their set against Noble and ALG. I think him showing up, and it was also part of what hurt them in those sets.
The win catalyst, the win condition for this team, in my eyes, not so much Verisiel as it is Benji. I said that when he is dialed in and is playing at his best, he's the best solo laner in the almost the entire world. Even some of the casters, new and old, from the SPL have said that he has yet to show his full potential, and that's a scary thing when it comes to a player like Benji, because he has been great at times, but he has yet to really start taking the game serious. And so when he does that, when he finally does that, I think Benji can carry games by himself. So for me, it's the win condition is the team playing good. But if Benji is not playing good, the team doesn't look good at all. That's just in my eyes.
Just to make sure we all agree that United doesn't need to change anything because they look good as they are now.
I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah, the only position that I would potentially change is Verisiel, just because he's the most inconsistent player on this team. But apart from that, and it's worth mentioning that for jungle there are no better replacements available. That's just a fact sort of right now in NA. So there's no reason to change anything, honestly.
I wouldn't make a change myself, but we brought up Vedium before with some other teams. It's important to mention that Vedium is friends with Benji and Chaos. Not saying that Panda Cat is not friends with them, but Panda Cat and Vedium, I would see that trade being more of a sad trade because they're both really good at what they do. They just do different things. Vedium is the quiet farmer, wait for late game. Panda Cat's the fighter. And on a team with so many people that want to fight, Medium might be a good switch to kind of rein in the rest of the team. But I wouldn't make a change at all as far as rosters go. But Medium is a possibility. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So, was that it from United? Or does anyone else have a point left that they want to make right now? Doesn't sound like it. So, let's move on. So, we were gonna do a general discussion about the split meta, sort of, but we are really deep into the podcast already. So I would suggest that we skip this part and just go straight to the MVPs. We're gonna do it sometime later in a later episode, whenever we get time to do so.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
Probably look at that being a part of the post DreamHack.
Yeah.
Not the DreamHack review, but the one right after DreamHack. I would expect that to be in that area.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense as well. Just because if we can include DreamHack in that, really. So, yeah. The one thing we have left to do for today are obviously giving out our split MVPs and our rookies of the split. Who wants to start with their split MVPs right now?
I'm volunteering Psycho because I need some time to think about this.
Okay, Psycho, do you have any?
I guess I could start. For you, like, first of all, it was actually really hard choosing one player because there were so many games and so many good plays. But for EU, I decided to choose Zeros as my MVP of the split. Just because, obviously, Dignitas actually just lost a single set. And in the whole split, they just lost 3 games. And Zeros was always there, be it his Morrigan, Soul, or Chronos. He always showed up and always was there for his team. He did have some great games, and he also didn't have any games where he would feed horribly or anything of that sort. So yeah, Zeros is the SPL split MVP for EU, and for Ferne it's also another mid laner, and it actually has to be Endinster. I was not choosing between Endinster and Baskin, but just seeing how Baskin didn't. He had these spectacular games in the last, I believe it was, on his Soul. Maybe I was even week 4. Not sure.
No, it was in week 5.
But also, and it's similar to what I was saying about Zeros. He was pretty consistent and always making plays for his team. And yeah, those were the MVPs for this split, in my eyes.
Yeah. I'm going to give Sabo some more time to think about his. So I'm going to mention mine first. For the EU side, I'm actually going to give my MVP award to Adapting. Because even though Energy only got 3rd place, he was by far the best player on Energy this split. He had good performances in every single game. Just look them up, really. Look them up and you will see he was good in every game. It is insane. This guy has basically 2 modes. He's always impactful when his team loses, and when his team wins, he is a massive part of the reason why they win. Because he has hard carried most of the games that they've won, and it's been insane. He has had an insane split again. Yeah, it's just adapting things, right? Adapting is this quintessential star jungler that you can have with this amount of carry potential that is unrivaled in any region in the world right now, if you ask me. So he is getting my reward for you. Yeah. For NA, I'm gonna go with someone that Psycho already mentioned, the other mid laner, namely Baskin, because it's kind of the same thing as with adapting. He was by far the best player on LG, which is obviously also a team that managed to qualify and that looked good through the majority of the split, and he was the most consistent player on that team as well. It's sort of goes into the same direction as adapting, where he had good consistent performances and had those carry performances that we saw out of him against the likes of AI in the last week, right? So I think he deserves this reward as well. And I think Andy has just been a tiny bit more inconsistent and a tiny bit worse overall than him. So that's why I'm not giving it to Andy, even though he was also in close competition for it, in my opinion.
Before we get into Jirai, let's say says MVP, so I'm just gonna quickly say that adapting actually had the most kills and the best KDA in the whole split, and he was third in the kill participation, and the first two players were from Flashpoint. So basically, it's not really hard to be a part of most of your 30 kills, but adapting had an impressive 85% with more than 180 kills and assists.
That is just insane. See?
They're just throwing it out there.
Well, one of us agrees, or two of us agree on one MVP, but we're all have different players for our European MVP. I'm going to go with Captain Twig as my European MVP this split. He's very much a catalyst on Obey. I think Obey is one of the top teams, is probably the best team in the world, and he has a lot to do with that. If you remove him from the team, I still think they're a top team. I just don't know if they're the best team. And I think with Captain Twig on this team, Obey is that much better. Just what brings to that jungle role. He has good success on these assassins like Nemesis and Susano, but he also has these warrior junglers that are impressive as well. And we saw Nike at Worlds. We saw a lot of Erlang Shin and Sun Wukong. He also brought Sun Wukong jungle back into the meta.
And Odin.
I just think, and Odin. I forgot about him.
Yeah.
But I just think Captain Twig has a huge part of the reason why Obey is so good. He has had a great split so far, and he's been fun to watch. He's always been one of the more fun players to watch in the league, but his play hadn't really been up to the level as it is right now. And now that his level or his skill is up so high with what he can do in that jungle, he's just a lot of fun to watch. So my EU award for MVP goes to Captain Twig. Now my NA MVP, I was going to go with Snoopy because he had a fairly good split altogether, winning 2 MVP awards for, I believe, week 3 and week 4 on Smite Pro. But I'm going to go with Anister. The impact he has on his team is just you can't state the impact he has on that team. I think a lot of players would have struggled going from jungle into the mid role more than what Anister did. But having Homifay there in the jungle next to Anister, where that it's still a downgrade from going from Anister to Homifay, but the gap is a lot closer than a lot of other situations would be. But having Anister in that mid and having play so well, I mean, the dude plays raw like nobody else plays raw. Not necessarily for the healing, but for the burst. And so, just what Anister was able to do with this team and how good of a split he has is made him my NA MVP for the split. So, I agree with Psycho as far as Anister goes.
So I didn't even agree on a team. You?
Yeah, like all of our MVPs are from a different team. So that is a thing. Yeah, but Twig, I just want to mention that Twig was part of the discussion as well, because he seems to have a bit more versatility than adapting, but overall I just rate his impact lower than adapting, so that's why adapting got my MVP award over Twig. But yeah. So the next thing, or the last thing really for this week that we need to discuss are rookies of the split that we also want to crown. Who wants to start there? Sabo, I assume you have those prepared at least.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start EU. My EU rookie of the split was the jungler for the Poppies. That's what's Drelo. I think he had. We talked about it earlier and how he and Warchi were pretty much looked like the only two members of the team at times. I think Drelo had. I think the jungle role is in general more impactful than the hunter role. That's why I'm giving Drelo the MVP over Warchi. But those two are fairly close for rookie of the split, not MVPs. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it to Drelo because the jungle role is so impactful. In a conventional wisdom would say Final K on base station, formerly Soar, but I'm going to go a little bit different. Say Aquarius was my rookie of the split, just based on how Noble finished the split, where I'm the only one who thought that they would finish as well as they did. I think Aquarius, like I said, has been very solid throughout the entire season. Flashpoint was not the highlight of his year, but coming to this Noble team in his current Noble roster, seeing where they can go and what the future holds for members like Aquarius, if he does end up staying on the team, is impactful for the fall split. I think he had a very solid summer split, and in some ways better than Final K, because at the times when Aquarius looked good, he looked better than Final K, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that is fair to say. I think for the EU side, I do agree with you that it's probably Dalo who deserves it most. I think it's pretty tough on the EU side to actually give out this reward, because there's no rookie that kind of stood out above the rest, or no rookie that really performed really well in general, right? Because obviously the rookie teams that brought in new players are the two teams stuck at the bottom, whereas we see a different situation in NA. So I'm probably just gonna give it to Dalo as well, because he looked like the best player on a team that didn't look all that good, but in lack of a better option, it has to go to him, honestly. as harsh as that may sound as well. But yeah. As far as NA is concerned, I think we've already mentioned Final K, and I would give it to him because he seemed a bit more consistent than Aquarius. Aquarius had his good games, and I think in those he looked better than. I agree with you that in those he looked better than Final K ever did this split. But overall, it just seemed to me like Final K had the higher base level that he showed in all the games they played. And it's part of what led his team, Space Station, to success. And I think he deserves to be rewarded for that, like he did with being able to go to DreamHack as the number one NA seed already, obviously. But yeah, so my MVP is going to be Final K.
I actually agree on both my picks with Robbie here. For you, I'm just gonna quickly repeat. Said the established teams didn't really pick up any new players, and the only new players were on the 2 Challenger Cup teams, and it wasn't like really stood out, but it was that the other players did have some really bad showings, and he didn't, even though he didn't have any great ones. For the most part. And in NA, I actually had a different pick before the show, but then I realized like Final K is still a rookie. Like it didn't really occur to me because he seemed so well.
So comfortable.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, that's basically it.
So you're giving it to Final K as well. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I guess that is it. Does anyone else have anything left to say right now?
I just want to take a quick second and apologize for last week, or I said Venenu was on the SPL Gatekeepers. I was obviously wrong. It was actually Moswell as a mid laner. So I messed that up. That was my bad. And I just want to apologize for that.
Yeah, I saw that on the wiki, but I didn't question you because, I have no idea about NA Challenger Cup. So
Yeah.
might have just been that the wiki was wrong.
It was my honest mistake. I had forgotten Moswell was a mid laner.
Yeah, it's good. No one's gonna crucify you for
I knew it. I knew it. I just messed up, and I just wanted to apologize for it. So
yeah, good. So yeah. Wait,
Ronnie,
in that case, I want to
Robbie.
apologize for something as well, real quick. I think I said in week 1 that Fails had a 24-something KDA. And I'm pretty sure it was actually only a 14-something. Because I misread something. So yeah, apologize for that as well.
I'm not gonna apologize for anything, but I'm just gonna remind Robbie. I actually wanted to hand out the meme of the split award as well.
Wait, we did? Well, yeah, we talked about it. It's definitely going to fucking Man Ray with his Mist Vulcan ult. And didn't we talk about this during the broadcast? Was that before?
But
anyway,
that was before.
Yeah, if we're gonna give out this special reward for meme of the split, it's going to Man Ray for his Mist Vulcan ult on the minion wave, on half of it in the mid lane, followed up by his Mist Backfire on the same remaining 3 melee minions, followed up by lazy backing and being killed. So yeah, Man Ray.
That's gonna be on Smite. What the F moments on for a while.
Yeah, it's as we said last week. This perfectly describes Flashpoint as a team and their performance this split. But let's not go back to that. Let's not go back to this sad topic.
At a point
because
in the night show. Oh, you missed the Vulcan. Okay.
yeah, good. So with that in mind, that was it for this week from the Tuesday Night Smite podcast. If you did like this episode, do actually like it on whatever platform you were watching it on, SoundCloud or YouTube or wherever else. If you want to be notified when the next show comes out, follow us on SoundCloud or subscribe to us on YouTube. We will post both there as usual. You can also follow our Twitter account at Tuesday Night Smite. You can always see it on the screen in the bottom left for updates during the weeks, for predictions whenever games happen, for all that kind of stuff, and for something special that is going to be happening this week as well. We are going to do a special live episode on the weekend as our sort of DreamHack preview. So we're going to announce it on Reddit still, but we're also going to post about it on Twitter. And we're going to have a giveaway there, which is probably the thing most worth mentioning. We're not entirely sure how much it's going to be yet, but we will be announcing that on Reddit as well, obviously. So yeah, we hope you can all be there, get some goodies, and have some fun with us in our first live episode. But that was it for this week. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for any feedback you want to leave us. Thank you two guys for being here with me today. It was, as always, an honor. And to end the show, good night, good Smite.